Hello and welcome back, and this is the Terramaster D1 SSD Pro. It's a little DAS drive. It's an external enclosure to pop an SSD inside and get some local pocket storage. I know what you're thinking, big whoop, it's 2026 Rob, we've got AI. Hear me out. The number of people I speak to about Terramaster is actually more than you might think. I talk about this brand, I think, more than most people. And one of the reasons I talk about it is I've frankly always had a soft spot for this brand. They were there at the early days of this channel, and when in the world of NAS, people were rocking out with Synologies and QNAPs and stuff like that, there was a brand alongside the kind of hyper, kind of mad DIY stuff. Terramaster was poking at the likes of Synology and QNAP in the world of NAS with their more affordable alternative. They didn't always hit the mark, but they did, and I liked that moxie. I liked that kind of gutsy attitude for these things, when they could have knocked out a Billy Basic alternative and not thought much more than that. Now that brings me to DAS, because it's now been, I think, about 5 or 6 years that Terramaster has had Thunderbolt solutions. They've had Thunderbolt DASs, Thunderbolt standalone JBOD boxes, and then integrating that in their NAS systems all under one umbrella for expansions, but also for photo video editors and kind of covering different bases. Now, in the last year or so, I've talked about some of their DAS stuff. There was that lovely little D4 4-bay. There's also been the more compact M.2 stuff, right the way through to larger scale, like kind of rack-mounted chassis looking things in those kind of large tower chassis they've got. However, these, when I first heard about them, I wasn't blown away, because I was like, Enclosures exist. I mentioned this in previous reviews. Terramaster attacking the subject of external DAS and external single bay cases, it seemed like a misstep. And then I started using them, and then this thing had been in my bag for the better part of 8 months. It's travelled the world a little bit, and one of the things I'd realised was missing is I'd taken for granted that when I do have a drive in my bag, when I do have storage, either pre-populated or ones that I fill up myself, heat was considered, it was factored in, but for long time durability and long time hitting drives over and over and over again for sustained periods of time, a lot of these cases are not built for sustained. They are built for access, pull, drag, drop, singular backup, stick in a bag, whatever. They're not made to be on for extended lengths of time. These are. Now, this video is a review of the D1 SSD Pro. It's USB 4 V2 or Thunderbolt 5, and we'll get to the performance later. But I wanted to overview the range, because Terramaster have been knocking this door for a while, and not a lot of people know about it. So this video is, yes, a review, but it's also look at these other things, because they're different deployments. Now, it starts off the D1 SSD. The D1 SSD rocks around for about $39 right now, and it's a USB 3.2 Gen 2 external case with a 2280 length SSD slot inside, thermal paste already pre-attached, USB Type-C output there, and can provide, they say, up to 1 gigabyte of transfer per second. Don't worry, we have put it through its paces later. Next up, the up until recently new D1 SSD Plus. This one took advantage of USB 4 and Thunderbolt 4, and this is a larger scale version of the one we've already discussed. Thicker thermal pads inside. It also takes advantage of a larger chassis, and this one promotes up to 3.6 to 3.7 gigabytes per second up and down, which brings us to that new bad boy. Now, as you've already worked out, they get bigger as we go along, but the new one is that USB 4 or Thunderbolt 5, and this one is promoting speeds of 6.8 to 7 gigabytes per second, but it's the sustained performance that I care about. Now, all of them are fanless. They all take advantage of full metal casing all the way around. Indeed, the smaller one, weirdly, actually has a rubber kind of panel inside around the main tray. And I don't know if that's something they phased out for temp reasons or cost reasons, but I do quite like the look of the budget one there at the end. But again, at $39.99 going into $76.99 right now, it's on sale for the D1 Plus, going into the top end at $199 currently at launch for the 80 gigabit model. They don't come cheap. So what do you get for your money? Well, if we get rid of the boxes, They all arrive with carry cases there, but I will say there is an odd inconsistency. The entry-level product there, that arrives with this nice little hard-backed case here that can hold the cable and the adapter inside. The newer one has an even bigger case where it fits inside and you've got room for your cable. But for some reason, the one in the middle comes with this weird little bag. And it's not that it's bad, but I've been carrying this around in this bag, and for the record, I did spill coffee on it. But it's not as good. And I kind of wish it had had this lovely case that these have, particularly given the price that it commands. Now, another thing they all include is, alongside backup software, by the way, that runs for mobile. There's a mobile app there for Android and for iOS that allows you to back up your phone, one click, one touch backup, but also client tools with Backupper. But alongside that, they arrive with the cables that you're going to need. But here's the thing. God damn, they're short. This is the 10 gig cable there. This runs at about 50 centimeters. The other two are barely anything. And I get it. They're going for portability. I get it. That they maybe don't want to include a big old cable because it won't fit in these cases. But these cables are insanely short. And kind of inconvenient to a point when, yes, my MacBook has got slots on the side, but my Windows machine has the Thunderbolt port on the rear of it, and it makes it incredibly uncomfortable with such a short cable. But the actual quality of the cables are really, really good, with the entry-level one being a nice fabricy nylon, and the other two being thick rubberized cabling, all clearly indicated with 10 gig, 40 gig, and 80 gig connectivity across the three. Also, interestingly, it's worth touching on that although the PCIe generation does improve as you go up to this side of the table, they all run on ×4 speed thanks to the controllers inside. So this one on a Gen 3 ×4 M.2 slot, this on a 4×4, and this on a 4×4. A lot of M.2 NVMe SSD cases you see in the market, one of the things they never tell you is the PCIe inside will either be fixed to a lower speed or fixed to a non-flexible speed. What do I mean by that? Well, if you put in, for example, some PCIe enclosures that promote 40 or 80 gigabits per second, but the M.2 inside specifically needs a Gen 4 SSD because it's actually at Gen 4 ×2 on the M.2 inside, the result is that if you put in a 3×4 SSD in that slot, it will bring it down. In real terms, I know it's complicated. What I'm saying is there are some M.2 NVMe enclosures in the market that if you put in a slower times speed SSD or a slower gen speed, you end up with a slower speed overall. These, as you graduate up, don't have that problem. Of course, if you do want to enjoy the full speed of this one, you will need to use a Gen 4 ×4 M.2 NVMe inside. But it also means that if you don't use a 4×4, you're not going to be hobbled down from ×4 to ×2 through no fault of your own. Which brings us to the actual real-world performance testing. I use the same SSD here. This is a Gen 4 ×4 SSD. And this SSD should promote performance speeds, according to the brand, of up to 6.5 to 6.6 gigabytes per second. Again, we could talk about numerical calculations of the actual terabytes. You can see it's over there calculated per gigabyte, per megabyte, per terabyte, but it was a 1 TB SSD. Now going to the lower end of the table, I got performance of around 914 to 988 in terms of read and write there, and that was a constant performance. Don't worry, we'll talk about thermals later on, but again, a very healthy speed, and that was across using Blackmagic with a 1 and a 5 gigabyte test file, alongside that using Atto as well, and that was at 1 and 16 gigabytes there. Crucially, that was sustained performance over a great deal of time. Now moving into the middle of the table, the Plus series model, exactly the same test with both Blackmagic and Atto, and I saw sustained performance numbers of 3.3 to 3.4 gigabytes per second up and down. Crucially, I also saw a peak, but it didn't go low. It didn't gutterball with oversaturation or any kind of temperature issue. Now finally we go on to the one at the end of the table, the one we're the most interested in. We saw performance there of around 5 to 6 gigabytes per second, and again that was Blackmagic 1 and 5 gigabyte files and Atto at 1 and 16. sustained performance. And it's the sustained bit I'm interested in, because SSDs in that sustained performance threshold at 4x4 will almost always start to throttle before the end of that Atto test, especially when it's a 16 gig, and especially when it's the last test of the 4. So no, I didn't see the SSD inside there hit 7 gigabytes there, but I did see it hit very high 6 gigabytes per second in places. But how did that reflect in terms of temperatures? Because that, let's face it, is a big deal. These are fanless. These are gonna get hot. Well, again, they're all metal all the way around, and I had the thermal imaging camera running across the 3. Now this was the thing that surprised me the most, because of the 3, the lowest temp was the fastest one. Between all 3 of them, I saw thermal temperatures, and again, all of the temperature readings you're going to see on screen are conducted after the start of the 4th test. It was when all 4 of them, during the 16 gigabyte Atto performance test, that was when the thermal readings were recorded. And in the case of the entry-level 10 gig model, that went to 42 to 45 degrees. In the case of the USB 4 Thunderbolt 4 model, it went from 47 to 50 degrees. But bonkers, the Thunderbolt 5 USB 4 Gen 2 or V2 version only hit 38 to 42 degrees. That surprised the hell out of me. Now, yes, it is a thicker dissipating material, and it still maintained that performance number there, but clearly it was doing its job in dissipating that heat, which you can see when it's lifted from the table there. Also, the fins have been optimized with each iteration. Hopefully you can see it there on screen. The way each of the heatsink fins have been cut in and separated with curves inside has been scaled up and improved upon with each model, allowing for a greater surface density to dissipate that heat. Now, none of these I would argue are that cheap. They're not. Terramaster is generally a brand that's known for being a little bit more cost effective. Let's be charitable and call it that. But I'm not going to call any of these cheap. But I am going to say they deliver. In terms of when I've used external SSD enclosures, when I have tried to use docking stations that have got M.2s inside, I've either been hit by thermal issues of sustained utilization, hit by performance throttling by M.2, scale down and time speed miscalculation and misappropriation from within the drive, or I've been using a drive that just simply was not doing what was delivered, what was promised alongside it. These do that. These do the job. They give me the performance, they give me the temps, and I trust that I can edit off of these things. It's just a shame, 1, the cables are a bit short, 2, that they're not going to be the cheapest in the market, and 3, they're so bloody big, but I kind of get why. But let me know what you guys think. They have been launched, again, the new one I think launched on the 25th, 27th of April. I think this video is probably going to go out towards the end of April, maybe early May. Let me know what you guys think. Have you utilised these before? Have you found them as sustained performance as I have? Or have I just fluked it? Let me know below. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.